Okay, I'm going to be trying something a little bit different this time. Gonna make it so that you can actually see me on the left side here. So we'll try it, see how it works out, if my editing skills are actually working. So let's just get into it. Chapter 12. This was the chapter that we had finished up on. We hadn't actually finished the chapter itself. There's just a few slides that we needed to cover, but we weren't able to. So we will cover them now. And so because something happened in the world where we weren't able to come back, and I'm not exactly sure what happened. So, Chapter 12, Exercise Prescription for Weight Management. So, we started off with the beautiful meme that we had for somebody who is trying to change their ways. So, making fun of a fat person at the gym is like making fun of a homeless person at a job fair. Person is trying to change their habits, change their life, and some people will make fun of them, but they're actually there trying to better themselves. So it's really weird how we do that sometimes. At least some people will make fun of other people for trying to make their lives better. Off my soapbox, I guess. Okay, so we looked at the chart here between the two individuals, the muscular guy and the kind of the dad bod looking dude. Both of them are 6'3", 250 pounds, 31 BMI. But you can obviously tell just by looking at them that one is a little bit more frumpy than the other one. The muscular guy there is standing in a nice pose, showing off his lats. His BMI is a little bit higher because of the additional muscle mass and the fat-free mass. So he has less fat mass than the other guy, than the guy on the right. So 38 versus 113. At least estimated fat weight for that person. And prevalence of obesity amongst American adults over the years, starting in the 60s all the way up till 2012. Again, I'm not sure exactly what it has done since then. I believe it has maybe not steadily increased, but maybe slightly increased. There's probably been some bumps and increases, maybe even a little bit of decrease here and there. But we are still way above than what we were in the 60s and the 70s. So let's actually take a look at that. Well, there was another chart there looking at underweight, normal weight, mildly obese, obese class 1, 2, and 3, and for BMI. Again, BMI is always thrown into the body composition analysis, but it's not necessarily telling you much about body composition, hardly anything at all. It's really just a relationship between your height and your weight. So you need to take it with a grain of salt, especially with somebody who is active and especially if they're an athlete. So we started to look at some of the states. Back in 1985, we didn't really have much data for quite a few of the states. And we went through this and we could see the colors start to change as we started to get more and more of that percentage of the population in each of those states becoming overweight or obese. So as we continue on, and we started to increase more and more obesity throughout the United States, or in each state as well. And we can see that Mississippi and Louisiana, as well as West Virginia, tend to go first. Not always, but throughout most of this. So, another pretty color. There we go. And more colors, which means more and more people that are overweight or obese. And we're continuing on. We have more and more. Again, the southern states as well as West Virginia in that case. Indiana was kind of an odd one there. I think I mentioned that Indianapolis tends to be one of the healthiest cities, and that's based upon a lot of different factors. It's just not somebody who is obese or overweight. It's there's like air quality. Different parks that are around, number of gyms, restaurants, kind of things like that. So it's just not all about people's weight in that case. So we continue on into 2007, 2008, 2009. We start to increase even more. So I kind of have a theory about this, and this is something I didn't get to mention in class. I kind of forgot about it, but I want to go to one that looks fairly clear. Okay, yeah, that's not a bad one. That'll be a good one there too. I think one of the reason is if you look at the states and how they are bordered and the shapes of them, we have a giant chef right in the middle of the United States. I don't know if you've ever noticed, I don't know if anyone's ever pointed it out to you, but let me point it out to you right here. So, if you look at Minnesota, that is the chef's hat. If you look at Iowa, that is his head, and you can see the little spot right there, that's his nose. And you have his neck right here in Missouri, and you have his belly right there. And then you have his upper leg, and then you have his foot, which is Louisiana. And you have this big bowl of pasta right there with Kentucky. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but just an observation. So maybe we were destined to be heavy. I don't know. Maybe not. All right, moving on. So let's continue on with more of this. So the creeping obesity, there's a decreased resting metabolic rate as we get older and older. Our resting metabolic rate decreases, our basal metabolism decreases. It's just a natural way of life. Now we can negate some of the decrease by remaining active. It could also maybe even take some potential performance enhancers. Not saying you should, but I'm just saying that it could. You could. So there's a natural loss of muscle mass that occurs as we age. And our activity tends to decrease. Most of us are out of sports, out of athletics, might have a family, might have full-time jobs. The time throughout the day, I know it's one of the excuses a lot of people use, but our time throughout the day does decrease in terms of free time, spare time. So you have to try to make time for that. And the more things you have going on, with your job or your family, the less free time that you would have. So more sedentary lifestyle. Our eating patterns, however, don't necessarily change a whole lot. At least we don't think we should change them. We were like, well, this is the way we've been for the past 10 or 15 years since I've been 18, 25. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'm going to eat whatever I want, and I'm going to look like this for the rest of my life. And sadly, that's just not the case most of the time. So that's usually what happens, is we have this creeping obesity that comes along. So the etiology of obesity and the genetics and lifestyle, there potentially could be genetics that is part of it. Probably not the only thing. More than likely, it's probably the environment that they're living in. If somebody has a parent that is obese or overweight, they are more likely to be obese or overweight themselves. Mostly because they are seeing what their parents are doing. They're eating some of the same foods as they grow up, and they see maybe eating a whole bag of potato chips and a 2 liter of pop in one setting is just normal. Well, why would I change that? So that's likely what is happening in most cases, but not all cases. 30 to 70% of the inter-individual variation from genetics. So it may play a larger role in the total fat and also the visceral fat, the fat that is within the muscles, not the subcutaneous tissue, and also maybe where you carry your fat a little bit too. Some might carry it more kind of in the rear, some might carry it more in the gut, it might be just all over. And genetics can contribute to obesity. Yes, it can, but it's generally, again, not the primary reason for it. It's usually a lifestyle or some type of environment that they are in. So the energy expenditure and caloric intake, again, that caloric balance equation, that is exactly what's going on. It doesn't matter if it's hormonal related of why your basal metabolic rate is increasing or decreasing or whatever it is. It's all based upon calories coming in and calories going out. That's all it is. That's all it ever is. So most influence development of obesity, So the energy calculation, the caloric balance equation, that's it. The amount of food intake, the types of foods that are eaten. Dietary fat is stored more readily as adipose tissue and contains twice as many calories as protein and carbohydrates. And we've seen that. We have about approximately 9 kcals per gram for fat, and we have approximately 4 for carbohydrates and protein each for that. A little bit more for protein, but again, we're getting rid of some of that nitrogen, so we use a little bit of calories just by doing that. So daily energy expenditure, So does the low physical activity actually lead to obesity, or does obesity lead to low physical activity? It's a good question. Chicken or the egg type of question, correct? So I think we discussed that. Let me get back to that a minute. So it's a chicken or the egg type of question. I almost think of, if you go back to the Austin Powers movie. Was it the second movie? I think it was the second movie. Movie reference for you. There you go. 90s movie reference, I believe. So Fat Bastard was the character in that show. In that show. Oh my goodness, I sound like an old guy. In that movie, and he was overweight or obese. And there was one time where towards the end, he was saying he is unhappy because he overeats, and he overeats because he's unhappy. So it's a vicious cycle, is what he called it. So anyway, moving on. So contributors to daily caloric intake. So we have activity is the only one that we can readily control. The thermic effect of food we can kind of control a little bit. The more food we eat, the more thermically active our bodies are going to be, because we're breaking down that food. Just the digestion and absorption itself is going to be causing some caloric expenditure. The resting metabolic rate, being active and maybe gaining a little bit of muscle mass, is going to cause the increase in the resting metabolic rate. But again, nature is going to take its course, and as we get older, it doesn't matter what we do, our caloric expenditure is going to decrease, at least slightly anyway, over the period of years. So it won't be significant within a year. It won't be like on your 30th birthday, you wake up and you're like, oh man, I got no energy. No, it's not going to be like that. It'll just slowly creep up, and that's the creeping obesity that we discussed earlier. So calculating daily energy needs, there are a bunch of different equations for figuring this out. There are a bunch of different nomenclatures for this. Resting metabolic rate, basic metabolic rate, there's REE, resting energy expenditure. All of those have a specific way of determining how many calories somebody's burning throughout a given period of time. Some of it is just sitting in a chair for a certain period of time, and you're measuring the carbon dioxide and oxygen. Some of it is you're sleeping in a lab overnight. You're eating a certain amount of foods. You're hydrated. You're proper. You have a proper diet, and a proper amount of sleep as well, and then you are measured for it from that. So, but there are different equations for it. It's just not, there's only one equation I can get from it, and all of this is simply just an estimation. We can't necessarily get exactly to the decimal point how many calories we're burning per day. So it is, again, just an estimation. Lifestyle habits for healthy weight. So reduce caloric intake, maybe a diet of 8 to 1,500 calories. Down to 800 calories, unless you're a small individual, that's a significantly low amount of calories. Not saying it's impossible, but that's a low amount of calories. If you go to Subway and get a foot-long sub, you're getting more than 800 calories. Even if you get a 6-inch sub, depending upon what you put on it, you're getting pretty darn close to that, 5 to 600 range. And then if you get a pop or whatever, so 1,500 calories is probably more like it. Again, reducing the caloric intake per day and trying to lose the weight slowly, it is going to cause people to more likely keep the weight off and not gain it back. The faster somebody loses weight, the faster they gain it back, and they do tend to gain even more back than what they originally had. So because it's such a shock to them, and most of the time, if they're losing it really quickly, they're not really changing their habits. They're just crash dieting. That could be crash exercising. I guess if that's a term, I'm not really sure. I just made it up. So reduce fat and carbohydrate intake. This could potentially help, but keeping the right balance of fat and carbohydrates within the diet is paramount. Making sure you get a good amount of protein. Carbohydrates are key, especially if you're active and if you are an athlete. Carbohydrates are a good thing. Again, not simple sugars, not a bunch of gummy bears or a bunch of pop or anything like that. We're talking about good carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables, good wheat bread, if you eat bread, and increase in physical activity and adopting healthy eating behaviors as well. Again, adopting those behaviors, not just crash dieting or doing some type of fad exercise routine. It's changing the lifestyle. That's what it's about. Because if you don't change the lifestyle, you're eventually going to revert back to what you were beforehand. So it ain't gonna matter. All right, ACSM recommendations for weight management. Again, 1 to 2 pounds per week. 1 pound of fat is equal to approximately 3,500 calories. Again, approximately 3,500 calories. So 2 pounds will be about 7,000 calories. So 1 pound of fat, again, about 3,500 calories. If you watch like something like The Biggest Loser and somebody has lost like 12 pounds in a week, that's a massive amount of calories they've burned. Not only burned, but taking into account the amount of food that they also ate, because they're still eating during that time, most of that's probably water that they lost. So they likely didn't lose 12 pounds of fat. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's dang near impossible. So losing it slowly, though, is definitely the much preferred method. So moderate caloric restriction plus the exercise, and again, trying to change the lifestyle from that. Limiting fat intake to less than 30 of the daily calories. 30% of the daily calories, excuse me, not just 30 calories, 30% of the daily calories. And then also 150 minutes of physical activity per week. So the frequency, intensity, time, and type are the fit. Frequency, 5 to 7 days per week. Intensity, 40 to 60 of the heart rate reserve. So trying to get up to that 60% and above. And then about 30 minutes per day is usually the recommendation for that. And having some type of moderate intensity, which is that 40 to 60%. And going above that, eventually working your way to that, getting some higher intensity exercise. And potentially even going into maybe high intensity interval training for that. So the type of exercise, any type of aerobic, large muscle groups, working the whole body, and also gaining a little bit of muscle mass as well, trying to have some strength training applied there also. All right, behavior modifications, keep track or keeping records, any documents, quantities of food eaten, social cues to eating, eating a cognitive process, plan the meals and the snacks ahead of time. And also establish some type of support system. If people are boo-hooing you for going to the gym or not eating, whatever foods there are at, a restaurant or wherever you might go, or you don't want to have that much beer, not because maybe you don't want to have a good time, but because you don't want the additional calories. Being around people that are going to help you move towards that change of the lifestyle is something definitely going to be much more beneficial for a client or somebody that you are working with. So behavior modification, again, for weight loss and weight maintenance. So define the behavior and the outcome goals, plans for rewards of success, avoid self-defeating behaviors, combine moderate caloric restriction and exercise, change unhealthy eating patterns, and then commit to, again, lifelong maintenance and change of that entire lifestyle. Okay, so we have this balance here of the energy and the caloric intake versus output. So on the one side, we got protein, lipids, carbohydrates for the energy input. On the output, thermic effect of food, physical activity, and the basal metabolic rate for that. So the one that we can change the most is the physical activity. That's where we can get the most calories burnt throughout the day, or the most significant amount that we can change throughout the day. The resting metabolic rate, it's not going to change from day to day too much. It'll change a little bit, but not too much. All right, this graph is just simply showing that over a period of time, crash dieting, and this was like a fairly significant amount of caloric restriction, in that these units are actually arbitrary. But throughout the weeks of semi-starvation, again, these were very low caloric intakes. I think they were definitely sub 1,000 calories. I think it was dang near 600 or 700 calories, I believe. So even within the first couple weeks, you can see a dip in the amount of oxygen uptake, which means that there's lower amount of calories being burned just throughout the day. So the basal metabolic rate has actually decreased, and you can see by 2 months it's decreased significantly, dang near 30%. and the peak there was, or the peak dip, it looked like was down there near 22, 23 weeks. So starving yourself, yeah, you can maybe lose weight, but people probably aren't going to keep it off, because once they get back to it, their metabolism could increase a little bit, but they're also going to be eating a lot more food because they just crash dieted in that case. All right, gimmicks and gadgets. This was the fun part. Oh my goodness. I was hoping to show some more videos, and maybe I'll link some videos. If you find any cool infomercials or anything like that, please don't be afraid to post them or send an email to me, and I can post it to Blackboard, and I maybe send it out to the class. So any type of gimmicks that has been tried for weight loss, there's a ton of them. I mean, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So the only proven long-term solution to weight management is, again, permanent lifestyle behavior change. It's the only way. Good exercise and healthy eating. Wow, good diet and exercise. That's a profound idea that was just discovered like 2 years ago or something. I don't know. So just kidding. Gimmicks may reduce weight, at least initially in the short term and acutely, but in the long term, most often it's not going to be working. So spot reduction. Now, there were a lot of different exercises you could do with Suzanne Summers' Thigh Master, but I mean, it was really geared. I mean, it's in the name. It was geared towards the thighs. So the abduction or the adduction of the thighs was kind of the main focus there. So spot reduction is the idea that you can take any type of exercise and reduce the amount of fat in that particular area, those muscles that you're working, and that's it. The fat won't be burned anywhere else. You're going to get, so if you do a bunch of crunches or a crunch machine, you will lose weight in that section and you'll get a flat stomach. Somehow, these people on these commercials, infomercials, think that people are dumb, which, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to get it out there that people aren't dumb. And you know it. Everybody else knows it. That you can't just lose fat in one particular area. When you lose fat all over. Now, we carry it in certain places, but if you just work out, say, your thighs, yeah, your thighs can be toned, but you still might have a layer of fat over them. If you haven't lost that fat and burned the additional calories, the fat's still going to be there. We're not going to be tapping into those stores. So just not a true sense of how we burn fat and use subcutaneous fat tissue. So spot reduction, again, not a reality. I can't remember what this one was. This was like the ab. This was more for the obliques. Again, another isolated machine. It was mostly to work the abs, and that's basically it. Ab belts. Oh my goodness. Oh, I get to go over the ab belts. Oh my goodness. I wasn't able to. We did go over the tug toner though. That one was a fun one. But the ab belts. Oh man, these things. Oh my goodness. Spot reduction gone wild. All right. I can guarantee you that those two individuals, the young man and the young lady in that picture, did not get those bodies, did not get any abs by using those pieces of equipment. No way. Absolutely no way. No one will. No one will. And let me tell you why. Here it is. So, if you know, raise your hand. I'll call on you. All right. The reason is the belts themselves. Yes, there could be a little bit of sweating that occurs because you could be restricting some of the sweat dissipation that is occurring in that area. But it's not going to be enough to lose any more fat, at least in that area. You might burn a few more calories by just having that on and restricting some of that. You're going to be losing a little bit of water weight as well. The ab belts themselves, a lot of them are electrically active where they're going to be constricting the abdominal muscles. So it's almost like you're performing a crunch throughout the entire day. And you see people sitting in their chair and they're typing along and they're like, yeah, and they're all happy because they're doing crunches and they're really not doing crunches or something like that. The reason that doesn't work is because of what we discussed in exercise physiology. Most of the muscular damage that occurs to cause a, a reaction, or basically DOMS, to cause a reaction to build the muscles up bigger and stronger than what they were, is in the eccentric phase of the contraction. This is concentrating on the concentric phase of the contraction. So, therefore, they're not providing enough of the eccentric phase. Maybe a little bit, but not nearly enough. Now, you could potentially cause enough damage through an electrical current to cause that damage, but the problem is it would probably be enough to kill you. So, no. So, the ab belts, no good. Butterfly, butterfly abs. This was another one. This one I think is a little bit sexually suggestive. I'm not sure how many people are working out with these things in their underwear, but this was the picture that they had. Almost looks like it's photoshopped. But butterfly abs working essentially the same way. Again, doesn't work. It can't work physiologically. It just cannot work. Yeah, you're going to be contracting the muscles a little bit, or they're going to be contracting on their own because of that electrical current. Kind of like a TENS machine, but not going to be losing fat in that particular area just because you're using that machine. Could the muscles get a little bit toned, or at least a little bit trained? Probably not. It's not significant. Instead of spending, if you were a personal trainer or a strength coach, or even just somebody trying to help a friend out, and they say, "Hey, I want to buy this piece of equipment." It's like $49.99, or what they are, $29.99, or two payments of $14.99, or I don't know, whatever it is. Just tell them, just do some crunches. They're free. Like, you can do them anywhere. You can do them on the floor. You can do them in your bed. Like, just do some crunches. Like, that's all you got to do. You want to do some weighted crunches? Just put something on your chest that has a little bit of weight to it, and just do crunches that way. It's not hard. So, man, I love it. Oh, there's a butterfly abs. There we go. So there was the promotional flyer or banner for them from their website. All right, getting into something a little bit more seriously, kind of shifting gears, and this is something that we're not able to cover there towards the end of the chapter. So, eating disorders, obviously a very serious topic, because of some of these pieces of equipment in society. When we think about, I kind of hate doing it. Oh, society is crumbling, but if you look at what we typically view as the perfect body, an Instagram model, if you will, sometimes it's not necessarily the healthy thing, because some will take it to the extreme, and it can go either way. And I'll discuss that. There's one that is more common, or a couple more that are more common in females, and one that is more common in men. So the first one we'll talk about is anorexia nervosa. Purposeful maintenance of body weight at less than 85% of expected weight for age and height for that individual. So there's an unhealthy body image disorder that is going on in this case, where they don't feel like they are skinny enough, or they weigh too much, even if they are underweight and severely underweight. So they have this extreme fear of actually gaining weight, or especially gaining fat. With this, there tends to be a disruption in the menstrual cycle. Hormonal balances tend to get out of whack, and that can cause some of the menstrual disruption. So there is usually three consecutively skipped menstrual cycles in this case. Bulimia nervosa is the other one. So anorexia is essentially starving oneself. Bulimia is there's a bunch of binging on food, and then there is purging and regurgitation of that food. So eating much food, then throwing it up. Some people will actually go back and forth between both of these disorders. And also bulimics do tend to be at least look a little bit normal weight. They don't tend to look really, really skinny tend to, again, on average, because they're still digesting some of the food and they're still getting some of those calories, but they're not getting all of them, obviously. So again, some of the same psychological issues can arise with the rise of bulimia nervosa. So there's also binge eating disorders, so large amounts of food without the purging. So engaging in these behaviors multiple times per week in that case. There's also subclinical conditions, so may lead to clinical eating disorders. Often emotional eating can take place rather than actually a physical hunger. So you're eating because you're distressed or stressed out. Something happened in life, which does happen quite often. And most common in younger women and also female athletes. And these three that we talked about, or these few that we talked about, anorexia, bulimia, sometimes the most often the binge eating, and any type of subclinical conditions do tend to be more in line with the female eating disorders. There is one that males tend to have. It's not necessarily an eating disorder, but it's a body image disorder, and it's muscular dysmorphia, or sometimes referred to as bigorexia. Seen in bodybuilders and people who are trying to get big. They don't see themselves, it's completely the opposite of anorexia. Anorexics don't see themselves as skinny enough or small enough or too fat, but people with this muscular dysmorphia or this bigorexia tend to view themselves as not big enough and they want to get bigger. So it could lead them down a road of obviously more training, but also getting into anabolic steroids and more of them as well. All right, strategies for weight gain. Some people do want to gain weight. Hopefully it's healthy weight that they want to gain. So encouraging fat-free gain rather than the fat gain can help boost the metabolism a little bit, but it's going to cause them to gain more healthy weight. So that resistance training is definitely going to be necessary to gain the muscle mass. So increasing caloric intake, you need to increase caloric intake. It's very, very difficult, actually almost pretty much impossible, to decrease the amount of calories, be in a caloric deficit, and gain weight. It's practically impossible. It is impossible. Getting that balance equation. If you want to gain weight, you need to bring in more calories than you're expending. And also increasing healthy snacks. So fruits, vegetables, peanuts, peanut butter, obviously healthy snacks there. Any type of fruits, grains, nuts, legumes, things like that. Complex carbohydrates, high quality protein. Roughly, protein recommendations are kind of all over the place. I don't want to say all over the place, but pretty much anything from 1 to 2 grams per kilogram of body mass, going to be plenty for most individuals. I don't think anything over like 2.5, 2.7 grams per kilogram has seen any type of benefit. Now, you may get a little bit more if you're somebody like Michael Phelps, who was consuming, 20,000 calories per day, or maybe some of the power lifters, they're consuming, thousands upon thousands of calories per day. Yeah, you're probably going to get a lot more protein with that. But in terms of the average individual who's consuming maybe, if they're very active, 3,000 to 4,000 calories per day, 1.5 grams or maybe 2 grams per kilogram is probably going to be plenty. So consult a physician continually losing weight or struggling to gain weight. So there could actually be an issue with that. So that was the end of chapter 12. That was the chapter that we had finished on right before spring break, and we just finally finished this chapter. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, anything, if you have any cool videos of any infomercials that have pieces of equipment that are designed for spot reduction or any type of ab machine, please don't hesitate to post them or send me an email with a link, and I'll try to get up on Blackboard. We can do something. We can maybe have a discussion about it. I wish we were able to come be in class, because we could have some fun, almost like a whole class of just videos of some of these infomercials. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And that is chapter 12. Thank you.